Welcome to the 2026 Dialogue, a masterclass series by the HR Association of India. I am Neha Jagnani, and today we are addressing a leadership challenge that is widely discussed, deeply felt, but often misunderstood in practice. Our theme for session is inclusive leadership, what it really demands from leaders. To help us explore what inclusive leadership genuinely demands, we are joined by Sumit Agarwal. Sumit is a global DEI advisor to Fortune 500 organizations and a recognized trailblazer in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space. As an SDG Ambassador for DEI and a mentor of change with NITI Aayog, he brings a rare combination of empathy, structure, and innovation to his work. Known for his use of Lego, serious play, design thinking, and visual facilitation tool such as Moth cards and Liberating structures, Sumit has conducted over 350 sessions globally. A UN certified inclusion expert and a motivational speaker, he is widely respected for translating complex DEI concepts into practical, actionable strategies that enable inclusive leadership and sustainable organization impact. Sumit, thank you so much for joining. It's always a pleasure having you.
My pleasure.
Great. So, looking forward to this exciting masterclass, Sumit. To begin with, my first question to you is when we move beyond intent, what does inclusive leadership actually demands from leaders on a day-to-day basis?
If I have to see where the term inclusive leadership comes from, right, I'll have to take a personal example. If I look at my life, right, I was put in systems which were not built for me. Not just for me, for any person with a disability, or be it a woman, for in fact, because many places still do not have separate washrooms for women, right? Uh, Just imagine, just to give you an example, a company like Shell, right? Oil company like Shell has a lot of remote locations, right? And there are a lot of women engineers who are working in those locations. Now there's an infrastructure challenge that how do you build separate washrooms for women, right? Or when I was at school, right? Nobody asked me if I could play cricket or basketball. Not because I did not want to, but because the systems were not built for me. Now we are looking at wheelchair basketball, wheelchair cricket, and all of that. But when I was growing up, that was not a common practice. Right? So when I look at intent of leadership, we have to look at the fact that a study by McKinsey in 2023 said that revenue increases by 30%, right? But only 15% of the global boards are diverse in nature, right? Why is that? Because there is a lot of intent, but people are still not looking at hiring people with disabilities or looking at gender diversity. They've just started scratching the surface. If I look at people with disabilities particularly, there are companies, but they are built for entry level inclusion, and when you shift to the higher levels, inclusion drops down significantly. So coming back to your question, what can be done when there is intent? The first thing is you have to start tracking opportunity distribution. People talk about performance metrics, but they do not talk about opportunity distribution. When I look at opportunity distribution, what do I see? I see who speaks in the meeting. I see how much time is allocated for that person. I see whether that person is heard or not. I see whether it's again a 80-20 ratio in the meeting. 80-20 means it's 20% of the people speaks 80% of the things and the rest are just silent, right? So if this is the case, this does not happen. In Lego series play Felicitation, we have something called a shared vision, which means everybody is able to speak, everybody is able to participate. So everybody's voices are heard. That's one of the core principles of DEI, right? The second thing is if you look at something called a Project Aristotle, which was done by Google, right? They researched on 80 teams, right, to figure out what is that one aspect which deeply impacts culture, right? Culture and team performance. That was, that was psychological safety. When I meant, so what do I mean by psychological safety? When I say psychological safety, I mean a safe space to be able to express yourself, a safe space to make mistakes, and a safe space to feel that you belong. You're not judged for any mistakes that you have done 1 hour ago or a year ago, right? So that matters more than IQ, that matters more than EQ. That what is your ability to commit mistakes and what is your ability to be not judged for them. Right?
Sure, sure.
So that matters. And the third step, if I look at it, it is process fairness. What do I mean by process fairness? Something can be said to be fair when only it is transparent. Most of the companies, what, how do they promote people? They promote people on the basis of familiarity. What do I mean by familiarity? Neha is attending office every day. Sumit is working from home. I see Neha working every day, but I don't see Sumit because Sumit is working from home. So probably Neha deserves the promotion and Sumit doesn't deserve the promotion because वो तो ऑफिस ही ले आता है. So the concept of familiarity becomes important if there is a lot of transparent, procedural, structural intent to measure KPIs and how do you measure promotions, right? That has to be there.
Sure. Absolutely. So there is tracking opportunity distribution. One aspect that you mentioned about Google is the impact that things create towards the culture, which is psychological safety. Last but not the least is the process fairness. So thank you so much for putting it together, Sumit. My next question is, in your experience, where do well-meaning leaders unintentionally fell short of inclusion?
See, well-meaning leaders, I think every leader means well, right? For whether it's for people with disabilities or whether it's for women, whether it's for anybody from marginalized community, right? Which brings me to my answer. If you're a well-meaning leader, you have a point of benevolent bias. What do I mean by benevolent bias? That, okay, I like Sumit, I have warmth towards Sumit, but I will not place him in high visibility, high risk situations where putting a person with a disability might jeopardize the reputation of my company. How does this look like? How does this translate into is, oh, Sumit is a very hardworking person. He comes regularly to office. He sits in front of the reception, and we never give him any meaningful work. What essentially happens is what is seen across teams of Nifty 50 companies and Fortune 500 companies is if you are not put into cross-functional teams with your ability to lead or manage projects and make meaningful contribution to work, your scope of promotion, your scope of career growth, that becomes limited after a point, right? So that is why benevolent bias, where you think that you are protecting the person by not placing them in high vulnerable, high risk situations, um, is actually detrimental for their career. The second thing which I must look into is you must look at your processes, right? You must actually look at your processes and actually see that who are they built for? How do you measure that? How do you have a structured point, right? Because most of the time, well, you are getting into the organizations, people say you are not a right culture fit. What is a culture fit? Culture fit is something which makes your senior leadership and your CHRO and CEO say that okay, he has studied from similar B schools, he has studied from similar certifications which I have done. Let us hire that person, right? So I might not be a very good cultural fit for your organization, but I might be an excellent performer, right? Why do I need to be a culture fit for your organization? Right? What what does even culture fit mean? It's a bias dressed as meritocracy. It doesn't have merit, but people window dress it as meritocracy, right? This is not how things are supposed to work. Third is feedback, which is very important. In terms of people from the minority sections or historically excluded groups, which is the right term now, I have seen that feedback is usually in terms of encouragement and not in terms of coaching. If you're a person with a disability, you're like, oh my God, you're doing so well. If you're a woman, oh my God, your approach is very caring. What do I mean by your approach is very caring and nurturing? You're not here to talk about my female qualities. If you're not here to talk about my disability, right? Oh my God, Sumit climbed third floor stairs just to attend a meeting. That is so inspiring. No, it is not inspiring. I had to do it because of your structural and systematic failures, right? The point is you have to have that uh, space where people are able to give proper feedback in terms of coaching. These are the things that you need to do to have a career growth. Because let's be honest, most informal conversations, right, decides who gets promoted in the workplace. It is not decided in boardrooms. It is not decided in formal meetings. It is decided on what people speak behind you when you are not in that room. Right? That's what decides your promotion. That's what decides your career growth. And that should be in terms of structured feedback, which people can utilize. So, yeah.
Sure, sure. Thank you so much. So you started with protecting the person and being thoughtful about who you're dealing with. You should be looking at your processes. How are you measuring it? The whole cultural fit aspect explained very beautifully, very nuanced. Last but not the least, feedback. If it's given in the form of a coaching, it makes much more impact and a lasting impact on the person. So thank you so much. My next question, Sumit, is how can leaders build inclusion without lowering standards or creating perception of favoritism?
What is standards? Is it something you think that you have, or is it um, merit thing that you think that you have, but it is really propagating sameness in your organization? If I am from Harvard, then I am somebody who's merit based. If I'm from IITs, I'm somebody merit based. If I'm from IIMs, I'm somebody who's merit based. However, if I am a coder from a tier 3 city who has built an app on my own and learning coding from YouTube, am I somebody who has merit, or is it going to be judged based on my pedigree? Is your systems built to measure skill-based impact? are you measuring my skills or are you measuring my pedigree? So that becomes the main question. And when we look at does inclusion drop performance and merit? What are you actually measuring in terms of merit? If you are measuring sameness, then it is not merit. It is just your comfort zone dressed as merit, right? I am comfortable. Somebody who knows an MBA probably can be good in sales. I need somebody with an MBA marketing. I will not have somebody who's BCom. Okay. So how does this come as merit? Well, there are three things that you can do to, offset this. One is have very specific criteria that is based on the actual job performance, not on the background of the, person. Have proper behavioral standards and evaluations, right? Have proper structured criteria where you actually tie in performance to the job role which is required. Also, when you are hiring somebody from the marginalized communities, please have structured, prominent feedback systems in place. Because I'll tell you, most of the promotions are decided based on feedback. You don't have any proper thing to measure feedback. All of the KPIs, all of the PMS, all of the data systems that is there will not be able to reflect proper things. And uh, my immediate manager and his or her surroundings and the people that I work with, the teams that I work with, the feedback is the most important factor when deciding promotion, right? So have to have structured feedback systems. Third is always have structured pathways for growth. For example, I'm a DEI manager, right? What do I need to do to become a DEI director in the company? Do I have a pathway or do I not know what to do? How will my performance be measured? How many years do I need to wait to become a DEI director? What is the one measurement metric that you look at to even consider me for that promotion? Right?
Sure, sure. Thank you so much. So there is having specific criterias, proper behavioral standards, and structured criteria mainly. Also, prominent feedback systems that becomes the key. Last but not the least, structured pathway for growth. There is one word that I heard very prominently spoken is the word structure. I think it is very crucial. It makes the process much more intentional, and it saves everybody from the being in the bubble of that uncertainty, where people can grow, and thrive in such an ecosystem where everything is structured. So thank you so much for bringing it up. My next question, Sumit, is bias often shows up subtly in decisions around hiring, feedback, and growth. So how can leaders become more aware of their own patterns?
So, what do you do when you identify patterns? You look at historical data, right? So, identify what kind of significant decisions your last 10 or 10 to 15 significant decisions. Look at it when you're free, right? That what is the last 10 to 15 significant decisions that I made? And who did I assign it to? Who did I give high visibility? Whose mistakes do I forgive the most? Right? Um, what kind of feedback do I give them? What kind of person do I label as high potential, high performing people? Right? What is their background? What is their style? Right? Do I actually prefer people with a kind of certain dressing sense? Do I prefer people in suits? Right? So all of that, you have to look at historical data. Second is always have the g- second benefit of doubt. What do I mean by second benefit of doubt? If I say a person wearing a sari will not be fit for a corporate HR job because, for example, I work with a fashion brand called Chanel or maybe Lakme, or it can be anything, right? So they prefer some other style of clothing. So a person wearing sari will not be preferred as a receptionist or a HR, right? Because so always have the second benefit of doubt that am I thinking the right thing? Or is it a job requirement or is it my requirement? Right? If it's my requirement, then it is not required. If it's a job requirement, then it is required. People tend to confuse job requirements with their own requirements, right? So when you actually confuse job requirements with your own requirements, that becomes an issue, right? So learn to distinguish between what is your own requirement and what is your job requirement. Third is always be mindful of whether you actually trust the person or whether you are being kind towards the person. If you actually trust the person to do high competency roles, if you actually trust the person to manage high visibility roles, which actually gives them career growth opportunities, then stop being kind to the person, right? And if you're just being kind to the person just because they're from the marginalized community, then that is not inclusion. That is just theatrics, right?
Sure.
That's just optics. That's just plain optics. When your leadership supports DEI, it becomes architecture. When your DEIB is not supported by leadership, it becomes DEI activities, right? Then
Absolutely.
you start ticking boxes in the PR calendar that you have.
Sure, sure. Thank you so much. Very thought-provoking. You started with looking at the historic data in order to analyze the patterns. Second is always have a second benefit of doubt. There is a difference between your requirement and the job requirement. So the focus has to be on what is required at the job. Lastly, you said always be mindful of whether you're trusting a person or you're just being kind. And very thought-provoking thing you said that if you're supporting DEI, then it's a DEI architecture. And if you're not, it just will be a plain DEI activity. It'll be jargons, it'll be check in the box. So thank you so much for bringing thought-provoking insights here. This brings us to the last question for this session, Sumit, which is if a leader wants to start being more inclusive tomorrow, what are one or two behaviors they must consciously practice?
I will focus on the main things that has to be there. One is rotational voice or a shared voice, where every member of the meeting is allowed to participate without asking for permission. People from the marginalized groups always seek permission. Permission to thrive, permission to survive, permission to anything, do anything, because they feel like they don't belong and they need permission from people. So you have to create a culture where permission is not supposed to be asked. If you want to do it, do it. If you want to participate in the meeting, please participate and make sure that your voice is heard, right? So rotational voice or shared values is very important. The second thing is intentional responsibility. What do I mean by intentional responsibility? If you look at people from the marginalized community, right, they have always had people from the higher up management, right, who have sponsored them by giving them high visibility, high risk roles, and they assume responsibility for that person, right? So sponsoring somebody is very important. Otherwise, you're just doing optics, right? You take the responsibility of a person and say that, okay, whatever that person does, I am responsible. I will sponsor the career of that person. That's how you change careers. That's how you change lives. Not just by saying, okay, you're doing well, and then just give the person a pat on the back. That doesn't work.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So there is rotational voice, shared voice of values, and intentional responsibility, which has much more lasting impact than just a quick feedback or pat on the back. So thank you so much. This brings us to the end of this masterclass, Sumit. Thank you on behalf of HRAI for sharing your insights and grounding perspectives today. Today's dialogue has actually reinforced an important truth, which is inclusive leadership is not just being, it does not mean you're perfect. It means how intentional you are, how you show up in everyday decisions, how much you listen, and create the space for the differences, without losing direction. So thank you so much for your inputs. It's always a pleasure listening your
Right,
insights.
Nehali.
Thank
Pleasure
you
to
so
be
much.
here.
Thanks a lot.